Oh, that was the wrong title of the talk. I hope you didn't come to see that. That was on the screen. The one in the schedule was the correct one. This one. So yeah, hi. Progressive web apps and app stores. So this is the first time I'm talking about this. And when I submitted this talk last fall, I had some things to say, but it was all in flux. So progressive web apps is a pretty well-defined technology, and the story around app stores is still developing. And when I submitted the talk last fall, we have one situation. Then late last year, it changed dramatically, and I was actually not sure that there will be anything I can talk about it in this talk. And I was also ready to scrap it altogether. Then the situation changed again, and now we actually have quite a few things to talk about. So let's begin. So web versus native is a decades-long flame war. So on one hand, we have on the web, we can truly write once and run anywhere. Everything we do on the web runs on most of the devices we have. The web is truly open, no one owns it. You can publish whatever you want, even if it's not really legal. And even if some company wants to take control of it, the resistance will form and it will most likely win. We have a huge ecosystem of tools, libraries, frameworks, and whatnot on the web. We can deploy our web apps to the environment we control, and it's quite easy, and the distribution goes from there without any issues. And we can link and deep link into our web apps. On the other hand, native apps, they do have access to native APIs on the device and can actually, at least in theory, build more performant apps you can build with native technologies. And they also usually conform to the look and feel and all the conventions on the platform. App stores, despite all of their problems with discoverability, they are still user-friendly way to acquire apps, and this is how most people like to acquire them. Native apps usually work offline by default, and we install them into our start menus, onto our home screens, and they are always one click away. So what are progressive web apps? So progressive web apps are not a framework, they are not a library or not some cult. They are basically a set of principles and technologies behind them that make web apps more native-like. So basically, they are trying to bridge the gap between web apps and native apps. So progressive web apps, as I said, is not some sort of framework. It's a set of principles, which was initially devised by Francis Berryman, currently from Netlify, and Alex Russell, who works on Chrome team at Google. And they defined a set of characteristics that progressive apps should have. So one is in the name, progressive. So they work for everyone, and then they improve depending on the capabilities of the device. They're responsive. This is self-explanatory. They work on every form factor. They work offline and in bad connectivity conditions, at least in some form. They look and feel like apps. They're always fresh. They deliver fresh content. They are safe. Progressive web apps have to be delivered through HTTPS. They're discoverable via W3C app manifest, web app manifest that you have to have in your web app for it to be discoverable by search engines and various robots and other things on the internet. They are re-engageable via things we all love, which are push notifications. Who loves push notifications in web apps? It's amazing, right? You all enable them all the time. And they are installable. You can place them on your desktop or on your home screen, on your mobile device, etc. And you still can link them because they are just web apps. So let's do a little experiment. Let's see if you can tell the difference. So on one hand, on one side here is a web app, is a Twitter web app. On the other side is a Twitter app installed from the Windows Store, the native app. Which one of them is PWA? Who thinks that PWA is on the left? And who think that PWA is on the right? Yeah, it was a trick question. They are both the same app. Just one was installed through Chrome and the other was installed through Windows Store. So it's exactly the same app running in different contexts. So who am I and why am I talking about this? So I built my first website I think in 1996 or 1997. I can't remember exactly. It was glorious. It was all the fire animations and Java applets and stuff like that. Then I did a lot of other things in web development, both on front end and back end. Then I switched to native for a bit. I started an ad network for Windows apps. I became a Microsoft MVP in Windows development, and now I'm actually transitioning back to web mostly by helping my friends at AM Charts. So all of this, like web and native apps and intersection of them was kind of up my alley. That's why I'm interested in it. So we can talk about each technology behind progressive web apps for an hour, and we can talk about each app store for another hour, but we only have about 40 minutes. So we will only do like a quick lap around what it takes to build a progressive web app and what tools and technologies we have to help us with that in 2019. And then we will cover what it takes to publish those apps in the app stores. So let's begin. So minimum viable PWA, to have an app that you can call PWA, you have to basically satisfy 3 criteria. It has to be served over HTTPS, it has to have an app manifest, and it has to have at least some service worker. So with HTTPS, everything is sort of clear, so let's talk about the other two. So web app manifest is basically a JSON file that describes your app. It has information about it, like the name of it, like icons, like start URL, etc., various settings for it, like display mode and other things. And then you just link to it from your index.html and you're basically done. You have your app manifest. An interesting part of that manifest is this display property. So this is the thing that tells the shell around it, how do you want it. So it can have various values. So one of them is browser, which is basically what your normal browser UI. Minimal UI is kind of minimalized UI where you only have navigation buttons and stuff like that. Standalone means that you don't want any UI, and full screen is self-explanatory. You just want your app to be full screen. And then you can actually access this setting from media queries in your CSS and do various things with it. So a common scenario would be, so if your app is running in the browser, you don't show the back button. If you are running standalone, then you may want to show your back button in your own UI. So kind of a big anti-example of that is Amazon Prime Video app. So I have it installed. And it runs like standalone without any UI. But if you go deep into some TV show, etc., there is no way to get back except for clicking on some menu item and going like to the top level. So that was app manifest. That's pretty simple. Let's switch to service worker now. So in a typical web app of the past, what you do is you just do a network request to your backend API. It goes to the cloud, returns the data, and if there's no connectivity, you're screwed, or you have to do something on your own to deal with this. So enter service worker. So service worker is basically a process running inside your browser in a separate process. It doesn't have access to DOM, but it intercepts all of your network calls, among other things. And then it can have logic of what to do with that network calls. You develop a logic what to do with it. Maybe you want to go to the network, maybe you want to go to cache, and all the things in between. So service workers are supported in practically all modern web browsers, so they are pretty safe to use, and we are using progressive. And the name is progressive web apps, so if you don't have them, you just don't use them. So service worker is a pretty low-level tech, at least in JavaScript terms. So, when we talked about assembly and WebAssembly, that's another level of low level. But if in JavaScript terms, there is quite a lot of ceremony with service workers. So they go through quite elaborate life cycle. So first, they are they install in the browser, they do all the setup, then they have to wait until all the previous copies are done, no one is using them, then they replace the previous copy, and then there is an activating event where you continue your setup and do all the cleanup of the previous, after the previous copy, and only then you get to the activated state where you can handle actual events that your service worker is meant to handle. So in simplified code, it looks something like this. So you check for if service worker is available on the navigator object, respecting the progressiveness of progressive web app. If it is, you just tell the browser where your service worker lives, and it loads it from there. Then install event is fired. Then you do your initial setup. Most often you just cache all the files of your app that are not likely to change. And then when all the step went through, you can handle network request. In this case, we handle fetch event in a very simplistic way. So in this piece of code, we check if we have a response for this request in our cache and return it. If we don't have it, we just go to the network. And if both fail, it just all fails. So not the best example, but quite simple and easy to understand what's going on. So people started using service workers and obviously came up with various scenarios, most common scenarios of strategies of where and how to use them. So some of them are network or cache, which means that you go to the network. If your network request fails, then you try to return the response from cache. Cache only, this is what you most likely use for things like your logos and other things that you pre-cached and they are never changing. Then the other way around is when you actually care about performance most, not the freshness. So you try to return the item from cache. If you have it there, you return it very fast to the application, and then you update the cache from network. And on the next request, they will have the new copy. And one that is often used but way more elaborate than the previous three is when you return an item from cache, then update the cache from network. When the item from network comes and you updated the cache, you inform the UI that you have a new version, and then it re-renders with new data. So this was a very quick lap around the main technologies behind PWAs. There is a lot of plumbing behind it that you usually repeat over and over again, and there is no reason in 2019 to do it manually, no reason to learn it by heart unless it's your only job, and we have various tools that help us with that. So one of them is called PWA Builder. It's a tool made by Microsoft and it's an open source library and a tool made by Microsoft and maintained by Microsoft. You can use it either from the web app or you can use it from command line from a CLI. So let's try to use the web app. So let's try to run a site that we all love through it. So let's say we own Stack Overflow and we want to make a progressive web app out of it. If I only could type. Yeah, so it runs, it analyzes the website, it checks if it has the manifest, it checks if it has the service worker, and as you can see, it doesn't have any of those, but it's served through SSL, so at least that is good. So then PWA Builder has this tool to generate the manifest. So it gives you the manifest based on like HTML meta tags, and then you can edit it. You can change the name. You can add all the icons for various platforms. So you take the logo, for example, and push it through here, and it should generate a bunch of images that you may need, if you want to publish and for app to work properly, and that it can be added to the home screen on like Windows, Android, iOS, etc. And then you can change all the settings like display mode, etc. So let's make it standalone. Then you just take this JSON, place it in your website, publish it, and add a link to your index.html, and you have your manifest. And it also has a service worker tab, where it has various recipes for service workers. But that's probably not something that you want to use. It will become clear why in a minute. Yeah, so that was all great if you want to modernize your app that you had like for years. But if you're starting a new app, you're probably using some framework like React or Vue or Angular and things like that. And they basically have you covered. So I used to create React app and Vue CLI to generate just a starter app in both. So let's see how they look. So if I switch quickly, you cannot tell which one is Vue and which one is create React and which one is React, because they both use the same library. As you can see here, Vue is using a slightly older version of the library, but still the same library called Workbox. So Workbox is a library made by Google that helps you handle all the different service worker scenarios. And instead of writing all of your logic and elaborate code or code like this that you can get from PWA builder, you just call a simple API where you just say that I want all the files all the requests that match this pattern to be cached using the strategy network first, and that's it. And as I said, if you are using some of the modern frameworks and their tools to scaffold your initial app, they have you covered. And usually, if you don't do anything fancy, you don't really need to do anything by hand at all. Yeah, so the installing experience is quite good and getting better all the time on all platforms. So you can install the apps through Chrome, and you can install the apps through other browsers. And on Android, you can add progressive web apps to the home screen, and they look and feel kind of like native apps. Yeah, so that was a very quick lap around what it takes to build progressive web apps in this day and age. And now let's switch to the other topic, which is publishing them into the app stores. So the first question you may have, especially if you come from the web development background, is why would you even want to do this? So if you remember our initial slide, you probably remember and you probably agree that most non-technical people are conditioned in this day and age to find and install and discover apps through the app stores. And no matter what you think about it, it's probably the most convenient way for them to find and discover and install apps. And especially for those who are paying you money and whom you sold on the idea, let's build one progressive web app instead of 3 native apps and the website. So they probably expect deliverables to be pretty much the same as what they would get if they were building native apps. But before you start and jump head on into into publishing your progressive web app into the app stores, you should consider a few things. So one thing is, do you actually need it? So which is obvious. Maybe you're building something that will not benefit of being in the app store, and no one will come to it through the app store. Maybe it's something for internal for the client, etc. This is the obvious thing. But then you should remember that even though you are building a web app and web is open and you can publish anything you want on the web, you cannot publish anything you want into the app stores. They have their rules and policies and conditions that you have to meet. So think about if your app meets those conditions. And also from the other side, think about whether those conditions that are applied by the app stores are compatible with how you do your business, with what your app is. For example, if you publish your app into the app stores and it sells some digital goods inside the app, rules of the most app stores dictate that you have to use their commerce and pay them 30% of those sales. So if you are doing something like this, maybe app stores are not for you, or you will have to, do some conditional displaying of in-app purchases, or not do them in the app stores. So let's start with the Microsoft Store, and we start with it because it was the first that had any special story for progressive web apps, and it's actually the richest story as of today. As you can see, there is an asterisk to that, which will become apparent in a few minutes. But it's still the richest story today, and it's based on the technology that Microsoft started publicizing in Windows 8 timeframe, I think. It was called Hosted Web Apps, which is kind of a predecessor of progressive web apps from the Microsoft side. And the most exciting thing about how Microsoft does it is that you get access to all the native Windows APIs straight from JavaScript. Almost all native APIs except for like XAML and stuff that is not relevant in the web context. So what does it take to publish your app into the Windows Store? So you have to get an account, a store account, which is $19 if you're an individual and $99 if you're a company. Then you reserve an app name which should be unique. Then you use a tool like PWA Builder, add everything that is missing, and go through it. Generate a package that you can place into the Windows Store, and then just upload it there, and you are done. So let's quickly go through the process. So this is what Microsoft dashboard looks like. So we have to go and reserve an app name. So let's do this. So hopefully it works, goes through the process. And then we should get identifiers that we need for it. So now we can go into product management for this app and get its identity. We will need this to generate the package. So let's go back to PWA Builder. Making Stack Overflow go through this would be a lot of work, so let's use a simple app that I made that actually is a PWA, a valid PWA. Yeah, so it analyzes it, it finds that everything fine, almost fine, it doesn't have push notifications, which is fine with me. And we go to build page, and then there is this generate wizard where you have to enter some details. Let's go through this. So basically you are entering identifiers for you and for your app, and then it should be able to generate the package that you need to upload to the Windows Store. Oops. Let's try to do it. So it does something. Oh, and it looks like it failed. Yeah, so I will not try to fix it here, probably something on there. But the idea is that you get a zip file where you have a package that you can upload directly to the store, where you go and start your submission through here, and you should specify description and all the other things, upload your screenshots, all the things that you would normally do to publish an app to the Windows Store. So this is what it takes to publish your PWA as is, but publishing your app as is not that interesting. What's interesting is doing crazy stuff on Windows from a web app. So before you can do that, you need to check if Windows is available on the window object in your browser. Then if you are doing something, so you probably cannot see this here. Try to, yeah. So then if you are doing something special with the system that requires special permissions, you need to specify them. You can do it all in a manifest file, but this is not the web app manifest file. This is a Windows app manifest file for the Windows head. So you can do it all in a package that PWA Builder provides you, and then use the CLI for PWA Builder to build an app again. But if you are not familiar with how things are done on Windows, you should probably just download Visual Studio Community Edition, which is free, and you can do it all in the UI. So this is a screen from an actual app that I made, which implements file association for Markdown files. So the app just registers to open Markdown files and show them to the user. And then when you've done that, yeah, when you've done that, you can access. Whoa. You can access all the Windows APIs. Like this, in this case, I'm accessing Windows Storage File I/O API to read a file on Windows, using the Windows APIs, not the web APIs. So a quick demo of how this looks in reality. So let's say we have this React app scaffolded, and it includes an MD file, a Markdown file that I was able to set an icon for my app on and register in Windows to open it. And this is a progressive web app running on Windows as a native app and actually integrating with the system to open some sort of file. And you can do pretty much anything a native app can do. Yeah, so I've started writing a lot of blog posts on the subject of publishing progressive web apps into the Windows Store and what it takes and what you can do with it. And I think I've written 5 or 6 of them. I was about to write some more, but then something happened. So pretty much out of the blue, Microsoft decided that they are switching their Edge browser to Chromium. And all of the technologies that I've shown you are based on the current or classic Edge or whatever you want to call it these days. So this pretty much means that everything that I just show you still works and will work for the foreseeable future, but it's pretty much a dead end because it will not be updated, but it will take years for Microsoft to get rid of the classic Edge. So if you want to build Windows first progressive web app that needs to do something on Windows, you can still use this technology and it will be around for a while. So I was hoping that at the Build conference that happened last week, we will get some more clarity of what's going on with progressive web apps, Windows Store, and the new Edge based on Chromium. So, and they had a talk titled Moving the Web Forward with Microsoft Edge, which talked everything about the new Edge and how to develop with it and all the things around it. So I was very hopeful. And they had this slide, which on the left it shows the current story that I just described, and on the right side it shows the future story with the new Edge. And as you can see in the bottom right corner, they have store plus browser written, but then after this slide they didn't mention store once in the whole session. So I reached out to Microsoft for comment on what's going on, and they said that basically the story is that the whole story around publishing apps, progressive web apps in the store with the new Edge is still in development. They are not ready to announce what's going to happen there, but what they were able to confirm pretty much 100% is that access to native APIs will not be a part of this story. But they are working now with Google and others to bring like the most important parts of it, like file association and stuff like that, to web standards, that there is some standard around it that you can do the most important parts of it with web standard code, not with some Windows specific code. Yeah, so as I said, you can still develop, you can still publish your apps in the Windows Store using the classic Edge technologies, and it will work for years. I'm pretty sure that for 2-3 years at least, but you will not get new features, and it will get fragmented over time, I think. So let's switch to Google Play. So right when Microsoft put everything in flux and I didn't have anything to talk about in this session, Google made their move. They introduced this thing called Trusted Web Activity, which basically lets you place a full screen, full-featured, evergreen Chrome tab inside your Android app. So now what it takes to publish your progressive web app into the Google Play. Again, you need to have an account, which is $25. Then you download Android Studio, and then you create there a new project with no activity, basically an empty project. And then you go through a lot of steps in a blog post published by Google and then covered by others, which will be obsolete, I'm pretty sure, in a couple of months when they do some better tooling around it. So I don't think there is a point for us to go through all the steps inside of it, but you just follow the steps, add some stuff into your Android Studio project, and you get it working you get all of it working. But what's not going away is that you will have to go to associate your app with your progressive web app. So in the Microsoft Store, you can publish whatever you want. You can publish Facebook as your own app, and they will probably notice that you've published Facebook. But if for something smaller, it will easily go through. But on the Google side, they want to verify that the Android app and the web app belong to the same entity. So you have to associate your app with on both ends. And then you just upload it to the Play Store. So I've never published an Android app before. I never done anything on Android, and it took me 2.5 hours from starting to read that blog post, to downloading Android Studio, to being published into the Play Store with that Markdown viewer. Yeah, so again, you have to comply with Google's Play policies. You cannot publish anything that is not compatible with Google Play into the store. Then another condition is that you have to get PWA badge in Lighthouse. Everyone knows what Lighthouse is. So Lighthouse is a reporting tool by Google that tells you various things about your web app, how it's doing on the performance side, on the SEO side, etc. And also it checks how it's doing on the PWA side. And then you have to get at least 80 or better score on the performance in Lighthouse. So let's see how it looks in Lighthouse. So let's go to the same app that I published. So this is running now on the web in Chrome, and you just run Lighthouse. It does its thing, and then it shows you the report. So as I said, you need to get this PWA badge, and you need to get a performance of at least 80. I got 100 here, and even though it's not too good in here, it's still good for the Play Store. So and then basically what you do in Android Studio, what I've just told you, you start a new project, you select no activity, go through the wizard, and then you go through a lot of steps in that blog post. Oops. And add a lot of things into your Gradle scripts, then update your manifest with various activities, etc. But as I mentioned, I'm pretty sure they will have tooling around it soon enough. And the important part is associating your app with your web app. So there is this tool. I went too quick through it. So in tools, you have App Links Assistant. So you go in here and there is an item to associate your website. So what you do here is you just fill in the fields. And you get this piece of JSON that you have to place into a well-known asset links JSON file and publish to your website, and then they verify that you own both apps on both ends, and you're done. Yes, so now we came to the Apple Store. Exciting stuff, right? So actually there is nothing there. Right now your only option is to use some tool like Cordova, stuff like that, and web view in it just to publish your web app into the Apple's App Store, and there's nothing special about it. There is a chance they will announce something in WWDC next month, but I'm not holding my breath for it. So overall, there is a lot of things that you can do with progressive web apps and publishing them in the stores. Obviously, we couldn't go deep into any of that in 40 minutes, but I hope I gave you an overview of what it takes to publish progressive web apps and what it takes to build them. The store story is still in flux, and you should probably use your own judgment if you want to go that route, but just know that you can do it on the Windows side and on the Android side quite easily. And if that is something that you can benefit from, it wouldn't take a lot of time from you to go that route. But progressive apps in general is a pretty mature thing, I think, by now, and there is no reason not to build all of your greenfield web apps as progressive web apps. So here are some resources I've mentioned in this talk. You can take a picture. I will share them later on. And if you are building web apps, please check the charts libraries that my friend built for charting for web apps. And if you are an introvert like me, but you like to get something out of out of conferences, I wrote this short book that Dev Day attendees can get for free by following this URL. Thank you, and if you have any questions, happy to answer them.